Okay, so in our first video, we created a new drawing file using the standard Stringer survey template. We had a bit of an overview of the commands on the ribbon, and then we opened up the Toolspace and had a look at some of the core settings and styles as part of Stringer. So what we're going to do in this session is bring in some raw data using Connect. And before I do that, what I might do is just give you a bit of an overview of the tool space. So we did have a look at the settings. Then we have point groups. So points are stored and managed within groups, and we're going to have a look at that a little bit later on. Point groups can create surfaces. So in order to create a surface, you need to tell the software what point group you want to reference, and surfaces that you create are listed there. We also have the ability in Stringer to create alignments, and these can be used for, maybe the conformance report, for maybe setting out or creating points. But also alignments are required in order to create strings, and with strings you can do things like plot long sections and cross sections out. So I'm not going to focus too much on these objects. The main focus for this getting started will be points and surfaces. Now, if I right click on any of these headings, point groups will open up our point group manager. Now, when you install the software, by default, these are the standard point groups, but you can go and quite easily create your own point groups, delete a point group. And just like the other styles we saw in the last video, everything's local to the project, but if I create some point groups that I want to set as global and use for future projects, then I click on this set as global. So Contourable is our main point group here, Contourable surface, and this will be told to create a surface, and that surface will be called survey surface. So if a point group is to produce a surface, a tin, all you need to do is tick on this button here and name it. So point list will, if it has points, they'll be listed in here. Obviously we haven't created any points yet. This point group will include all points that get created. However, under exclude, we've excluded some points based on their description. So points that have the code grid or SO, DES for design, we don't want to include those. But you can include and exclude points using a number of different properties here, maybe based on elevation, point number, even layer and style. You can include and exclude points. But this point group, as I said, include, set to everything, and we're just excluding based on code description. Okay, I'm not going to delve in too deep on the point groups just yet, but it's important to know that when we create our points, they're going to be stored in this point group, and when we see some contours appear later, that's because that point group creates a surface called survey surface. Okay, so point groups, later on we're going to create some survey strings. We have a nice dedicated viewer to edit survey strings. Later on I'll show you the code report as well. In the last video I mentioned replace codes. So this idea of taking alphanumeric codes and converting them to numeric or vice versa. That's what replace codes is. Compare report is a conformance report that I've been talking about. So I guess the point here is any of these headings you can right click to access commands. And even when we create objects, we can right click on the objects to access context commands. So down the bottom, Connect imports raw data files, manages our raw data. This button next to it's about Kogo point creation. And there's a number of different ways we can create Kogo points. We can import a point file. We can create points manually by referencing an alignment, by referencing a polyline on a grid. Draw cadastral lines is used to create points and lines using bearing and distance. And convert Kogo points is a useful tool because you might have some 2D or 3D raw CAD data, maybe text or blocks or points, and you want to use that information to create Stringer Topo points. That's what that command is for. This command here will open up our survey string manager, or even create strings if they don't exist. This button here, very useful for adding extra blocks to a point. So for example, a tree where you might have picked up the trunk and the canopy, so you can add extra blocks that are created and scaled using properties from your code. This button outputs a legend table. This button here does a helmet transformation, and this button is model viewer. So I just wanted to overview the tool space a little bit more before we jump into connect. So let's go and do that. I'm going to run connect, and this dialog box appears. And it is modeless, so we can zoom and pan around in CAD whilst this window's open. I'm only obviously displaying on one monitor, but a lot of users of Stringer will have more than one monitor, so you could park this on a separate monitor. Even the tool space could go on another monitor. So everything's grayed out. So what we need to do is create a new project. So we go to File and New Project, and we give the project a name. So this is Footy Oval. Footy Oval is actually an old famous data set of Stringer that we've had for many years. This is optional. You can fill out some details, who was the surveyor, the date, drafting date. This information could be useful if someone else opens up this project. Data storage by default, we store data inside the drawing file. However, you do have the option to store data outside the drawing file. So if it was a super large survey, sometimes storing data outside the drawing file can be of benefit, but by default, we're packing the data inside the DWG. I mentioned default styles at the start of the video, so if you do set up some custom code sets or string sets, then you can specify those for alpha and numeric. This means we don't have to pick from lists all the time, and don't worry too much about the advanced tab for now. So I click on create project, and that project is set up for me. And what I can do now is add raw data. So this panel on the left hand side is where our raw data is stored. You can have multiple raw data files. Maybe you went out day one, picked up some survey, went back out day two, and so you got these different raw data files. You can just bring them in here. So I'm going to select on add, and I'm going to add day one's survey. I only have day one. We can either open up a file. You do have the option here of creating an empty raw data file. So you can actually create, as I said, a completely blank raw data file, and manually build up the raw data by specifying, your control, and then your orientation between controls, and then all the side shots, etc. So you could do it completely manual if you wanted to, but what we're going to do is click on open, and if I just go to my folder here, I'm going to open up that SDR file that I showed at the start. However, good chance you're using another file format. So if you go to this drop down on the right hand side, you'll see the files that we support, different Topcon, Trimble, Carlson, Leica. In fact, there's two Leica options here, one for the raw data and one for the points that might reside in the Leica XML. You can also just bring in a raw point file, a standard point file in here, like a comma delimited file. And the beauty of bringing it through Connect is you can view the point data and even see the points in our viewer before committing it to CAD, where strings might be created, a surface might be created. But anyway, we're using an SDR file, so I'm going to click on and open that, and then select on add. So what we do is we convert that raw data into an RW5 file, and what we're looking at here is that RW5 data. So up the top here we have a whole bunch of notes. Then HT is a height of an instrument, which you can see here. and then we have some control points set up. So the easting northing elevation, we have an orientation between those, another instrument height set up, and then we have a few shots that have been taken. So for every shot, we can see, you know, the occupied point, what the point number is, the code, distance, bearing, and even some attributes as well. So this raw data can be completely edited. So, you know, if I wanted to change the instrument height, I can go in here and make that change. If I click on a particular shot, you know, I can make an edit here. If I right click, then I could do something like set ignore status, which means that the software is going to ignore that entry and that side shot won't be included. In fact, I could do that with any of the raw data items. If I click on set ignore status again, then it's it's back in the frame. So this raw data file is meant to be can be edited in any way you want, and we don't have a delete. So if you want to delete, that's when you go set ignore status. And the beauty of that is, you know, you can always bring the information back. Now, I did mention you could create a completely blank raw data file, and that's because we have this option here called add item. So at any stage you could add in another side shot manually. Maybe you want to add a note in, an instrument height change, a new control point. So it's really just a matter of clicking add, filling this information out, and then the software will add that entry to the list here. Now, the other thing I mentioned at the start is I actually had some coordinates for my control. At the moment, we're just an arbitrary coordinate. We know that because it's 1000, 1100. But I had a CSV file that represented or contained the actual coordinates for my control. So what we can do is click on the control menu here and click on control editor. So what this does is it lists all my control points, the easting, northings and elevations, and I could go in and manually edit those if I wanted to, but I can also edit them in other ways. For example, maybe I had another point in the drawing that I wanted to grab the coordinates off. I could do that. Maybe I already have some COGO points. Maybe I've done a traverse adjustment or something on the control and I wanted to bring those traverse points or reference those traverse points for this control. CAD pickup is just me just picking anywhere in CAD and whatever the coordinates are will be set onto the point. And there's an auto option, so if I have points, COGO points with the same point number, then it'll automatically match the easting and northing with the points in the drawing. But I don't have any points in the drawing, so I'm not going to use any of those. What I do have is that file, so I'm going to go import control file and pick on that CSV file. Now, as I mentioned, let me just open it up again. I've clicked too far, but that point file basically had the point number, the easting, the northing, and the elevation of the control that I want. And so in order to read that CSV, I need to pick a file format. If you remember from the last video, we could set up different formats. So I want to pick the first one because that's the format of my control. When I click OK, you can see those coordinates adjust. So I'm now running off MGA coordinates. However, I haven't applied those changes yet, so you can still see we're at 1000, 1000. Now if I click, we can sort of do a bit of a comparison. A lot of the interface in Connect works like this. So if I click on one tab quite often, or one field quite often, this raw data editor might update, and even it'll zoom to the point in CAD as well. So anyway, if I go and click on apply changes, then those coordinates are now being brought into the raw data. Now, when you make any edit to the raw data, even if it's changing a number here on the side, that raw data entry will turn yellow, which which it has for our control point. So any yellow entry is highlighted as being edited. Now, if I right click, I can actually run reset. Reset item brings it back to what the original value was. Not that I want to do this for my control, but that's what it's for. If I wanted to reset all my control back to the original, then we go reset control. Now, my CSV might also have a datum shift, or new elevations that I want to adopt. I didn't adopt the elevations, but we could if I clicked on edit control elevations. And if I brought that point file in, whatever the elevation was in the control is what would be updated here. Another command, not that I'm going to do this, but there's an option to create update COGO points. So this is just for the control. So if you just wanted to get the control points into CAD, as I said, maybe you wanted to do a traverse adjustment or something like that, then you can do that. So I want to click on close. Actually, just before I do, anytime you see a table, quite often there'll be these two buttons. This one is output a table in CAD, an AutoCAD table, a BricsCAD table, and this one will output a CSV file. So any table you see, we often include those two buttons. So if I click on close, we've adjusted our control, and what we might want to do now is just view the raw data before we commit to importing and creating those points in CAD. So we can do that by clicking on 2D Viewer, and what we're looking at here is all our points. Some of those are defined as control points. We're seeing our side shots, and these are colored differently based on what controller was set up from. And we're also seeing our orient and our Backsight checks as well. Now, with this particular survey, the Backsight checks for some reason were way out of whack, and we actually have this symbol appearing here, which means that our Backsight checks were outside our allowed tolerance. Now, I don't know what happened with this survey, but all the Backsight checks are out. That's why we get this red circle and that symbol there. Okay, so up the top we have this ribbon tab, so we can do things like maybe turn on the code and the elevation for each point, so we can see the code, the elevation. Maybe we want to turn off the radiations or those side shots. Let's just only show the point number. We can toggle on and off the orients. We can even turn off the control points as well. The errors that we're getting are these backside errors, so we can turn them off. But let's turn on the control point. So this is where we were set up. And then, as I said before, the radiations are colored based on the control, and you can customize for whatever reason. You customize the control, or maybe you want to turn off side shots that were picked up from this point or from that point, so you can customize the display of those radiation lines based on, you know, whatever control. But let's just turn all of those on. Now, the other thing you can do here, and I'm sort of running out of real estate, I want to import that raster image. So if I click on Insert, I'm going to run Attach Raster Image, and I'm going to pick this JPEG file. Now remember, there was an associated JPW file which stored the coordinates for this image so it gets positioned correctly. So if I click on Open, we don't have to specify or scale because all that comes from the coordinates. Click OK. I double click the middle mouse button, and there is our image. So what we can do here is click on this button, Aerial Image, and pick on the image from CAD, and it'll overlay the image in our viewer. And this is sort of gives us confirmation that, you know, we're in the right spot. So all is looking good so far. Now, if I hadn't have adjusted the control earlier, then we wouldn't be able to overlay the image like we are doing now. Now, as I mentioned, if I do things so like click on a point or a side shot, see how it's zooming to that point in the raw data editor. It's also zoom into it in CAD as well. So it's pretty cool how there's a connection between all these views that we have open. Okay. Okay, so we had a look at the point display, the display of the radiation lines, aerial imagery. I noticed there were Backsight errors. Now we can run an orientation report, which is going to give us all the deltas, and in this case I just wouldn't even look at the deltas because for some reason they're so far out. But this is where we could review all our orientations and review the difference to the deltas in the checks. And of course you can export this to a table in CAD or CSV file. Point coordinates I'm going to get to a little bit later. Control points, we were in here before. This is where we can review the control. The final button on this ribbon is watch survey. So let's just turn on the radiations again. This is quite useful if you wanted to sort of play the survey from the start and sort of see the order at which points were picked up. So if I use this scroll bar, you can see the points picked up at different spots. You can see then we changed to a different station. We'll see a bit later. We go move to a different station. See the points around the car park, and then the points around the building picked up. So it's quite useful to sort of go back in time and watch the survey. So that's what the watch survey command does. Over in settings, I wouldn't bother too much in here, but we can do things like set the back color, set some colors up for the orientation types, and that Backsight check is showing us anytime a check was outside 0.5 radius, then it's going to display that error which I had turned off. Okay, but yeah, this is the 2D viewer, and as I said, it's the benefit really is to view your survey before you commit to creating the points in CAD, stringing things up. The other benefit of it is overlaying multiple day surveys and making sure that everything overlays as expected. So this is the 2D viewer. I'm going to close that down. So I'm going to try and keep these videos to around 20 minutes. So I'm going to end this video, but when we continue in the next video, we're going to look at reviewing the reduced coordinates, and then we're going to go and create the COGO points in CAD.